Nobody likes Nazis. That's a pretty universal statement, and it's true, not even Nazis like many other Nazis. Of all the acceptable targets in media, as TV Tropes describes it, most of which are zombies and superbugs, Nazis are the only human ones. Right? Even when you fight against the evil Soviet communists, somebody's gonna raise an eyebrow. Not so much when you're going up against the SS. That's because Nazis are a bunch of cunts. But something has been brewing over the past 2 or 3 years, and it's been heating up over the past few months, maybe, right? And it's gone to the degree where it's almost reached its boiling point. And here's the kicker. It's not Nazis. No, what's gonna explode soon is the fear of Nazis. And from what I can tell, it's something that's happened in the past, and it might actually be kind of predictable, though that's not a good thing, because the predictions are dire. I posit that this whole kerfuffle, this whole horrifiedness around Nazis right now is a moral panic. Much like the satanic panic, or the countless instances of witch burnings that have happened throughout history. That's what I think pretty much the Nazis is right now. But what is a moral panic? Well, according to your boys Eric Good and Nachman Ben Yehuda, there's 5 ingredients you need for a moral panic, and I will now be reading them off Wikipedia because it's such a readily accessible source, and there's really no reason why it shouldn't. There's no spin you can give these 5 things. I'm going to be giving it the spin. This is me. These are the situations where you can use Wikipedia as a source, really. Concern. There must be the belief that the behavior of the group or activity deemed deviant is likely to have a negative effect on society. I mean, it's Nazis, right? Pretty much everyone agrees that Nazis kind of a bad effect on society. But nobody cares because there's just not a lot of Nazis. It's not relevant. Hostility. Hostility toward the group in question increases, and they become folk devils. A clear division forms between them and us. This is also, we got this covered. This even before Donald Trump got elected president, there was a lot more fear of right-wingers than there are now, and especially after it happened, violence against Nazis and right-wingers, which were now clearly defined, became acceptable. The meaning of the term Nazi has expanded hugely, right? Everyone on the right is just a Nazi. Just all the people on the right are Nazis. And you have a lot of people in the center that are Nazis. And then also some people on the left that are Nazis. Because when you go into us versus them mode, there can be no room for nuance, right? That you have to make sure that it is acceptable to do violence against these specific people, and also those specific people are not very well defined, so you can pretty much do it against anyone you disagree with. Because let's be honest here, most of the people that are getting hurt from the war against Nazis are Nazis. They're not Nazis. Consensus. Though concern does not have to be nationwide, there must be widespread acceptance that the group in question poses a very real threat to society. It is important at this stage that the moral entrepreneurs are vocal and the folk devils appear weak and disorganized. Right, so the moral entrepreneurs are basically the people who generate morals. They're the early adopters, right? The trendsetters of new norms and values. And the folk devils, well, they're the baddies. Do you think there is widespread acceptance about the idea that Nazis pose an imminent threat to society? Well, fucking yes, there is. Right, you have all these calls for impeachment for someone who isn't even a Nazi. You have, especially after the whole Charlottesville situation, people are freaking the fuck out. And even Charlottesville was bad, but it's not really an imminent threat to society. Everybody believes that the White House is being run by a bunch of idiots, which, to be fair, that's not technically incorrect. But yeah, there is a huge amount of people who everyone and their mothers, every public figure of any size, and small people too, they're all saying, oh, the Nazis, this almost going to destroy everything, that have so much power, but at the same time they're such idiots. Disproportionality. The action taken is disproportionate to the actual threat posed by the accused group.
I'm kind of a symbol.
Support of Donald Trump may have made her a target.
Volatility. Moral panics are highly volatile and tend to disappear as quickly as they appeared because public interest wanes or news reports change to another narrative. This is something that'll happen in the future, and we can only hope that it comes soon, because the thing is that it's not just being a Nazi that makes you a folk devil, it's just being right-wing or tolerating the right-wing. That already you already have the folk devil card. You're already you're an evildoer. You're one of the baddies. This does make sense because all of the moral entrepreneurs these days, well, they're all on the left because they have all the platforms. And so what easier thing than to blame their political opponents for all the ills of the world? And yes, the moral entrepreneurs do get their platform over the media. The media is the primary component of any moral panic, right? I mean, sure, there's Fox News, which is pretty much the only major media outlet controlled by the right, but I mean, everyone agrees that they're not really to be taken seriously and that their audience is dying and that they're just an example of how incompetent and dangerous the right is at the same time, much like Breitbart or InfoWars. The media plays a key role in any moral panic, right? They're the ones who set the program, they declare the symbols, and they blow the issues out of proportion. Take Trump, for instance, right? All of the time, the media is talking about Trump and how evil he and his administration are, and how just the most comic book villains, they're caricatures of themselves, right? But really, name one thing that Trump has actually done. Right, especially just a bad thing. I mean, sure, there must have been some minor stuff. But as a matter of fact, Trump is too incompetent to get anything done. It's just not something that happens. Let's look at the timeline of a moral panic, shall we? Number 1. Someone, something, or a group are defined as a threat to social norms or community interests. We've already been through this. Right-wingers and everyone who tolerates them are evil. Next point. The threat is then depicted in a simple and recognizable symbol/form by the media. I mean, aside from, the obvious, the swastika, which has been a symbol for Nazis for a while, there's some a little more goofy that has been declared a symbol of the folk devils by the media and the institutions that are supposedly authorities on such issues.
All key tenets making up the emerging racist ideology known as the alt-right.
Also, there's the red one, the MAGA hat. Number 3. The portrayal of this symbol rouses public concern. Yeah, try putting on a Pepe shirt in just any major American city, right? Or wear a MAGA hat. Or be judged, just blanket judged for having a fucking frog in your timeline. Number 4. There is a response from authorities and policymakers. This has begun happening, right? They're tearing down statues now, which they've had plans for doing this in some cases for many years, but now they're actually doing it because now it can be spent for political capital because those statues are related to the moral panic. Because if they make them symbols of the folk devils and then they tear them down, they become symbols of the folk devils. That's the thing. There's also been some legislative action done in other Western countries, which is a lot of restrictions for free speech have been called for, and some of them have succeeded. in some nations, such as the one that I'm in right now. Can't talk about it. Look, I can't. What I fear is that this is only the beginning of the legislative action taken against the folk devils, right? And if we know one thing about legislature in response to a moral panic, it's that it's not good. It never ends well. Remember the war on drugs? Well, that shit was a moral panic, that time perpetrated by the right, but it doesn't really matter. We're still sitting out the negative consequences of the legislature put in place to combat that, right? So the government could say, look, we're doing something against this issue. And some of the things they've put in place are so fucking cancerous that we're afraid that we can't ever remove them at all because they've gained so much power. If you haven't noticed, this is where we are right now, at least in the early phases of it. Right, the real heavy legislature. If it comes, it's still going to come, and it's not going to be good. Number 5. The moral panic over the issue results in social changes within the community. You know, like when you do something completely innocuous that just really isn't all that dangerous and doesn't lead to things that are worse than some of the things which are allowed. But yet still you go to jail as one of the worst fucking crimes that can ever be committed because the legislature put in place for it is so incredibly fucking disproportionate. You think maybe that's a dangerous situation we might be in if the moral panic is about what amounts to free speech? I think this particular moral panic is a little ill-defined probably because we're right in the middle of it. And also because it's fucking huge. There's so many different aspects to it because more than ever, everyone can participate, right? We don't just turn on the news and get fed the memes of the moral panic. Everybody's spreading the memes all the time. And everybody's constantly consuming media and the memes of other people. So it's just a fucking huge snowball effect and it doesn't stop. Not only that, but the social media platforms that people use to spread the memes of the moral panic are really in there. They support that shit. They're fanning the flames. They're building the anger by making people think that, yeah, of course they're right and Nazis are the worst and something must be done against them. They think it is their responsibility to help destroy the folk devils by any means necessary because they're good, decent people. And nothing is as dangerous as good, decent people on a fucking crusade. The sheer amount of moral entrepreneurs involved in this moral panic makes it just such an incredibly multifaceted thing that is about so many issues. It's against being right-wing, it's against being Islamophobic, it's against being transphobic, it's against being pro-free speech, apparently, also in some ways. But above all, and like all the other moral panics that have ever existed ever in the history of ever, it's against being nuanced. You think the Red Scare only affected communists? No. And anyone who was even remotely open to listening to the wrong ideas was fucking ended, right? Their lives were destroyed. They were annihilated. Sometimes they were disappeared, right? This is McCarthyism. Was born out of this shit. And that's usually not something that people look back on fondly either. And now, as we're standing on the beginning of a new Red Scare, the people who will be picking up the mantle of McCarthy are supremely powerful tech giants who know everything about you. And I mean everything. This is a level of technological sophistication that during the Red Scare, they couldn't know at which location you are at which time. They couldn't listen to you over the phone at all times. Now they can, right? They can make anyone believe anything about you at any time because they control what people can see by way of filters. And you can't just opt out, you can't just take away their grip of power over you because you need their cooperation to survive in this new internet world. They are at the epicenter of the moral entrepreneurs, right? This is what Jordan Peterson is trying to warn people about, right? When you're doing the right thing, principles are just thrown out the window. And Google arguably has the makings of a corporate cult. And when an entity that powerful, which has the power to destroy anything about you, decides to do exactly that, in spite of the fact that it would be heavily immoral, but, you know, morals don't count anymore, this is why they're going after perceived right-wingers first, and then also after all the people that are nuanced, because nuance is a slippery slope to them, right? In their minds, in the them-us mentality, there is no nuanced people. There's just folk devils in disguise who pretend to not be as extreme, to use their silvery tongues to talk people who are maybe open to other ideas into joining the evil folk devils, and that must be averted at all costs. They're already going after the revenue, and they will not stop until they have it. And they're already going about censoring certain viewpoints on platforms they control, but they're a bit careful about not being called censors, right? But imagine when it comes to the point where it's actually okay to censor people so long as they are folk devils, where censorship isn't considered a societal evil anymore by the majority of society, so long as it is directed at the bad people. When they have the revenue and the censorship on their platforms, they will go after the alternative platforms, and they can. If Google doesn't want your website to be found, they can make that happen, right? And add to this Reddit and Facebook and Twitter being in the same boat, and things go bad. Eventually, they'll go after the hosters of the alternative services, because that is the last line of defense that there can be. They will go after them, their lives, and their families, even if they completely disagree with the folk devils. Because the moment you are in some way associated with the folk devils, you are a folk devil. There can be no room for nuance, because if you doubt your righteous cause, you are too much of a risk to become one of the evil people that are a massive threat to society. They'll probably end up killing net neutrality by, throwing in their chips with the ISPs, which is something that right now they're quite, or in the past, they've been quite defensive about, right? They like the net neutrality, but if it turns out that's a method of controlling the conversation, they will take it, right? Sure, they'll lose some money, but at that point they will no longer be controlled by profits, right? That will no longer be their motivation. But the worst thing that a powerful organization can have as a motivation will be their motivation, which is ideology. What I'm trying to say is this. My friends, we're fucked. It's over for us, right? If you make YouTube videos, especially if you make YouTube videos that are in some way associated with commentary, and you've ever maybe hinted at having the folk devil opinions, or respecting the folk devil opinions in some way, or accepting the fact that they can express their opinions, people who are much more powerful than you, and to a ridiculous extent, almost godlike, will be abandoning their principles and systematically go after you, and there is nothing you can do about it. Even if you're anonymous now, doing all this commentary stuff, Google knows who you are. And probably because you've given them the information and asked them to keep it private, but they will not hesitate to make it public once they're motivated by annihilating your points of view. They will have no quarrels going after your money, your job, your career prospects, your family, your children, anything they can get, they will take. And all that is not that far in the future, right? Moral panics are relatively short-lived, but they're highly fucking volatile. And if you don't think that fucked up shit like that can happen, open a history book. Worse things than that can happen, much worse things than that can happen even. The rise of the Nazis over concern about the Jews being the puppet masters behind all the ills in the world. That has a lot of parallels to general moral panics. And let's just say that murdering 11 million people in concentration camps just the slightest bit disproportionate to a bunch of bankers in Wall Street fucking up and crashing the world economy. We, the enlightened old centrists, or whatever you want to call us, are more dangerous to the moral entrepreneurs than the actual folk devils. Because if they show them the folk devils and what the folk devils have to say, well, people are going to be enraged. But if they hear us talking instead, they might realize that things are a little more complicated, And the issue is blown way the fuck out of proportion. That is why they need to silence us. Everybody needs to understand that this is a moral panic and know what is a moral panic and how it can get out of hand, right? Because yes, Nazis are cunts and right-wingers are holding back society, whatever the fuck that means. But if we do not relax, take a breather and look at this somewhat objectively, this situation will develop into things that the history books of the future will not look back upon fondly. Also, if we stop with all the Nazi shit, we could probably talk about the real societal ill that is threatening to sink the human world of the humans, which is obviously fidget spinners. No, but seriously, stop. I'd rather not be killed for being nuanced. It's just a personal preference of mine, but it's really something I'm passionate about. Sorry for being a little bit of a Cassandra here, or maybe a Nostradamus, hopefully a Nostradamus. But this is something that could very legitimately happen in the near future, and it fucking terrifies me, right? It's happened in the past, there's no reason to assume it wouldn't happen again. And no calm worlds or shields of irony or witty fucking jokes are going to save us from the mob and its leaders. And by us, I mean, you know, sort of just commentary channels. By all means, don't leave the conversation. You're fucked anyway, right? Join the conversation more and maybe do something to make sure this whole situation doesn't escalate by being calm and rational and nuanced, because right now there's still some you can do. It's just that if you're already in there, no matter if you're big or small, you're gone. Your life is over if this escalates negatively. And yeah, it doesn't matter what you do. You've lost already. And even if you're not some sort of YouTuber or blogger or any sort of public figure, Google knows what you're doing. Google knows what you think. They know what you've said in the vicinity of your phone and your search results and the things you've posted on the internet. They know all that, and they will not forget, because the internet does not forget. It's just not something it's very good at, isn't it? Anyway, thank you all for watching. Do the things that you do with the YouTube video. If you have, just subscribe. Be excited maybe, because as long as we're not all getting gulagged soon, there might be a very, very, very nice, huge, exciting project coming to this channel soon. It's honestly, this is gonna. I'm really looking forward to this. I've been working very hard for the past couple of days. I'm just saying, we're gonna go into the shadows. Also, you might have noticed that there's a distinct lack of activity on Who is Betty, which, let's be honest, you haven't noticed that because you don't watch Who is Betty. But the reason for that is that I'm taking a break from writing until sort of late September when I come back from my vacation. So I can focus on other stuff, you know, background work, outlining, world building research, and also this YouTube channel. So yeah, see you around, cunts.